Hello and welcome to PK's webinar on how to win in the post-pandemic world, evolving towards a digital selling model. Before we get started with today's presentation, I want to remind everyone that all attendees have been muted and today's presentation will be recorded. We encourage all attendees to get involved today in our discussion by including any questions you may have in the Q&A tool within the Zoom platform. We are also excited to announce that this webinar is currently live on LinkedIn on our PK page. And at this point, I'd like to introduce today's presenters, Jared Dodson, Head of Digital Selling, and Ethan Laser, Senior Consultant.
Awesome. Thank you, Chelsea, and hello to everyone. Welcome to the webinar today. So my name is Practice, and I'm joined by my colleague, Jared, who leads the entire practice. So I'm really excited to discuss this topic as there's been a lot of innovation in the digital selling space over the last year. And I know this is a topic that's top of mind for many of you, and you're probably actively planning your post-pandemic strategy. So I'm equally excited to have Jared here to discuss and walk through the different ways that organizations are addressing both seller and customer experiences in this changing environment. But before we jump in, let me give everyone a quick introduction to PK and kind of, all right. So just some quick context on PK and who we are. So we are an experience engineering firm. And what that means is that we are dedicated to building differentiated experiences for customers, sellers, and even partners. And we do this through a set of end-to-end integrated digital services that help our clients imagine, validate, and realize experiences that drive growth. So one of our core areas of expertise is around seller experience and how you enable them to meet clients where they're at in the moments that matter. And Jared, do you want to talk a little bit more about what we mean by that?
Yeah, happy to, Ethan. And hello, everyone. Also excited to be here and discuss this topic with you all. As Ethan mentioned, we have a huge focus around seller experience. And the main reason for this is that in the B2B space, sellers are really the authors of customer experience. So if we do an exceptional job of enabling our sales teams, then through them, we'll ultimately deliver an exceptional customer experience. And I think we'll talk about this more in our discussion, but at a high level, our approach is to look at the seller experience across the entire sales landscape. So from how sellers are organized to how we're directing them, enabling them, and ultimately making them smarter.
Yeah, that's a great summary, Jared. And on that note, let me just share a little bit about what we're going to talk to today. So our conversation is going to focus on 4 parts. First, we're going to talk about what the next normal is going to look like. Then we're going to discuss what it's going to take for B2B organizations to win as we move forward. And then Jared's actually going to demonstrate some of the tools that organizations are using today to stand out. So with that, let's jump in. Alrighty. You know, one of the terms we've heard thrown around a lot during COVID was quote unquote, the new normal. And it's tempting to think about digital sales today as the new normal, something that precipitated entirely from COVID. But the truth is that organizations have been on the digital transformation journey for years now, even decades. And the reality is that COVID has just accelerated the trends that were already on the table before the pandemic. And as one market leaders put it, it was like condensing 10 years of transformation into one. So Jared, let's dive into some of the data to better understand the underlying forces that are really going to determine the long-term state of play for B2B sales.
Yeah, happy to, Ethan. And just, you know, you're breaking up a little bit, but I think I got your question. And as you said, you know, over the last decade, we have seen this gradual shift toward virtual digital-led sales. But last March, right, businesses really had to figure out how do you do business almost entirely remotely. And likewise, sales organizations had to figure out how do you sell remotely. And at the beginning, frankly, there was some anxiety there, especially for B2B organizations that were selling more complex solutions and had both these inside and in-field sales motions. But I think what we found, which was interesting last year, was that when done right, buyers actually showed preference for digital engagement. And this does make sense, right? Given what we know about these changing buyer preferences for B2B buyers. I think one of the big trends that we've been seeing over the past few years is the fact that B2B buyers are starting to behave more like B2C customers. They're expecting more in terms of personalization and convenience in the purchasing cycle. And from a sales seller and sales org perspective, there's a benefit too, right? Because folks no longer had to get on planes. You inevitably had more output per seller. And for similar reasons, the cost of sales was actually much lower last year with all the savings from not having these big physical events or travel expenditures.
So Jared, given what we know about buyer and seller preferences towards digital experiences, once this is all over, is that something that's we see happening?
Can you restate that, Ethan? Sorry, you were breaking up.
Yeah. Are organizations going back to a status quo once this is all over?
It's the question of the hour, and it's been a question that we've been asking sales and marketing leaders and analysts over the past 6 months. But I'd say that the feedback is pretty clear. Most organizations, they're not going back to operating the way they did before the pandemic. And even though when prompted, nobody really knows exactly what their organization is going to look like a year from now, they do know that it's not going to be the same as it did look like pre-COVID. And personally, I do believe that this is a paradigm shift type moment in B2B sales, one that could be the biggest in modern times. And so the focus of leaders that I've been talking to is really around now, how do you then reimagine this ecosystem of customer touchpoints across the customer journey in a more digitally native way?
You mentioned the word paradigm shift. And that suggests really that something huge in the industry is unfolding. Tell me a little bit more about why you think such a major shift is happening for the industry.
Yeah. So look, what we know from looking at economic history is that when the world evolves, those that stay get left behind. And then when we look at the last wave of major reorganization that happened when consumer businesses moved from brick and mortar onto the internet, that was a major delta. And since 2000, 52% of companies in the Fortune 500 have either gone bankrupt, been acquired, or frankly just ceased to exist. And I believe that that same reorganization wave that hit consumer industries 10 to 20 years ago is really now crashing in on the B2B world, of course, propelled by the pandemic and these changing B2B buyer preferences. And frankly, I think there will be winners and there are going to be losers here in the near future because of this.
That is a powerful statement I think you just put on the table there. And I'd love for you to dive into why you really expect to see such a major market transformation unfolding.
Sorry, Ethan, sorry, you broke up again.
I'm sorry about the challenge here. Can you tell me a little bit more about why you expect to see such a major transformation unfold?
Absolutely. So look, while so much has changed in the last year, there is one thing that remains the same. And that is that the experience that buyers have with your company will be the single greatest factor in determining their likelihood to buy from you and continue doing so. And we know that buyers have moved online and that they're demanding that businesses meet them there. So the ability to deliver a compelling buying experience remotely and digitally will inevitably draw the dividing line between the winners and losers in this current wave of competition. And studies support this, and they've shown that leaders in this space are outperforming their peers in all key business outcomes: pipeline, win rates, overall revenue, right? Early adopters are putting themselves in these lead positions.
Yeah, it's powerful to see the data on this. And I'd love to dive deeper on that point and just to kind of qualitatively describe what that experience looks like.
Yeah, absolutely. So really there are two sides of this coin, right? There's the buyer experience and the seller experience. But let's talk about the buyer experience first. So at the highest level, the buyer experience has to be tailored, interactive, and intuitive, right? And more, they're wanting this to be completely self-directed. Some of our recent studies show that a growing number of buyers are having greater appetite to want to buy not just simple solutions independently, but also complex enterprise grade products and solutions as well. So I think what you're going to see in the next few years is leading B2B organizations are going to be investing more in creating these no-touch B2B buying experiences. But I'd say at a minimum, the expectation is that buyers can self-serve to aid in things like discovery and solution fit. That means they can get information on the product, pricing, they can test the product out themselves completely independently, and of course, get an understanding of what other folks are experiencing. But of course, not all B2B sales is independent. And especially when you look at enterprise and mid-market segments, customers will be reaching out to sellers. But when they do, they expect that they are known by anyone and everyone in that organization. And they want to feel like they have a trusted partner, right? Helping them across their entire pre and post purchase experience. So what that means is that if you did business with them 2 years ago or 2 minutes ago, they really expect you to know that. And because they have so much information independently, when they do reach out to sellers, they expect those engagements to be higher value, deeper insights, and generally more than what they can get on their own. And lastly, they want their experiences to be connected, right? So maybe the independent assessment that maybe took on your website a week ago, they expect that to be a known quantity, right? And so, and take into account when they are engaging with sellers of that vendor.
Yeah. I'd love for you to tell me a little more about kind of what this experience looks like on the seller side as well.
Yeah,
And the
I think
irony
you
is
said
not lost on me. I recognize that my internet connection here couldn't be more timely given the conversation.
No worries. I think you're asking about the seller experience. So
Exactly.
look, in order to create the types of experiences I just talked about, you really do have to empower your sellers to become more like trusted advisors, with giving them the ability to meet those customers where they're at and provide relevant guidance. And this really does start with things like account intelligence, right? Sellers need a full picture of the customer's relationship with your brand. And that not only includes typical things like what they bought and when, but also whether they're getting value out of it, and even what's been their kind of recent marketing engagement. I will say that there's nothing more embarrassing than reaching out to a customer with a cross-sell upsell message when they aren't already getting value of what they're currently using. So organizations really need to focus on connecting, right, those core data platforms, your CRMs, your marketing automation platforms, your CDPs and customer success platforms. Now, in terms of delivering highly engaging moments remotely, sellers need tools, right? So they need tools that can reproduce the value of those in-person engagements, but in a digital format. And these touch points, they got to be more meaningful than what traditional static content can provide. They need to be interactive experiences and more valuable than what customers can generate in that self-serve mode. And we all know that relevance is king, especially in messaging. So it's also important that we empower sellers with content that's smarter, that it's based on the person and the persona they're talking to, the industry of the account that they're talking to, and even just the type of account, right? And in addition, we also have to make it easy for them to customize even further, ways to build custom presentations and demos quickly. I'd say my last point on this, Ethan, is if we want sellers to advise and guide more, they really need to be able to quickly see how a customer has engaged and what the outputs of those engagements were in order to decipher what the next best action is.
Yeah. Are you able to hear my next question?
I can hear you now.
Okay. Yeah, I'd love for you to just talk a little bit more about holistically how businesses are taking this this opportunity and really attacking it across the board.
Yeah, it's a good question. I'd say when we think about sales organizations holistically, there are really 5 pieces that collectively deliver an exceptional buyer experience. First and foremost, organizations are currently rethinking how they organized around the digital selling model. And they're really starting to rationalize what are really the differences between inside and field sales now that everybody's remote. Secondly, leaders are really getting laser focused on where they win. It's said differently, where does their product truth directly map to customer pain points or opportunities? And with that, what are the 4 activities that sellers need to go do to activate against that scenario, which we call sales plays? Thirdly, relevance, like I said, it's important. It's becoming more and more important now that there's a lot of noise. So how do you cut through all that digital noise? What we're seeing is a significant trend moving towards an industry first approach, because it really enables sellers to speak the language of their customers. And we already mentioned sales intelligence, but what this is about is democratizing insights across teams. No more separate dashboards for pre-sales and post-sales. Account managers need to know the status of customer health and what customer success engagements are going on. And conversely, CSMs or customer success managers, they really need to know what sales opportunities are in flight. But I'll tell you, the piece that I think really sits at the heart of this conversation is the digital engagement element. These are the tools and experiences that buyers interact with over the course of their purchasing journey, and where we're starting to see incredible ROI for early investors.
I think this framework is really helpful way to take inventory of the different parts that contribute to an organization's maturity. But in effect, almost everyone is selling remotely today. So tell me a little more about what good looks like.
Yeah, everybody is selling remotely. You're right about that. But I'll tell you, when we think about digital selling, it's more than just video calls and slide decks, right? What you're seeing here's an example of how one company we worked with over the past year really reconstructed their sales journey in a digitally native way with new experiences that differentiate their solution at key moments. And so what you're seeing here is digital tools that are a mix of both self-service, customer-facing tools used to drive things like leads and early stage learning. And you're also seeing seller-facing tools used to facilitate complex discussions, aid in business analysis, and even develop proposals. And all these tools are designed, of course, to help sellers deliver these, what we've been talking about already, right? These interactive and personalized experiences that deliver more value to customers. So let's take digital workshops as an example, because this was an area when speaking to leaders, everybody was addressing this particular key customer moment in this last year. And the problem statement is, how do you take what used to be a half-day on-site engagement and really put that in a digital format and still get the same or better value that you had when you could collaborate face-to-face? And that's a tall task for sure. But when done right, and in thinking about the advantages of digital engagement, you can really craft an experience that not only enables robust collaboration, but can also lead to a better output, and one that can automatically be synced with their CRM and shared with the entire account team. And backing up for a moment, right, that is one of the advantages of digital engagement. When all of these tools are integrated within existing digital environments, from web to CRM, and that data can get aggregated into a 360-degree view of the customer, that's where you can really enable sellers to have these personalized, data-driven discussions. And conversely, sales leaders can really understand what's working and what's not working and scale those best practices across their organization. So Ethan, if you don't mind, I'd like to make this a little bit more real. And I'd like to share one particular tool that this organization built in the last year that's really had outsized impact at opening up the door to value conversations and really pushing opportunities along.
Yeah, let's jump in. That sounds awesome.
All right, so let's bear with me here because I'm going to try to then move the screen here.
Perfect.
Are you seeing the solution assessment?
Yeah.
All right. So before I dive in here, just a primer, and before I go through some screenshots, what you're seeing here is a mock-up of the tool and not the tool itself. But as the background, we developed the tool called Solution Assessment for a B2B organization that was transforming in many different ways. They were looking to move from a traditional product approach to more of a solution focus. And because of this, and given the pandemic, they also pivoted their messaging and they started to reach out to new buyers and personas. And lastly, they're also dealing with shifting their sales roles given the remote work situation. And they needed all of their sellers to be able to drive better discovery conversations in a more digitally native way. And so this particular tool served three purposes for the sales organization. One, it was able to scale best practices in terms of initial interactions with customers by guiding sellers and customers through a structured conversation. We'll show that in a minute. And secondly, it also helped them create more consistent customer engagement and more predictable outcomes, because at the end of this, it provides us a standard artifact that can be a leave behind. And thirdly, it really helps unlock more consultative, value-based conversations by really identifying areas of inspection and opportunity. But I'd say the real value is actually on the customer side here, because in addition to receiving a more personalized and relevant discussion from their sales rep, they walk away with a customized report, right, that outlines these areas of opportunities, and that frankly it's a great input for their strategic planning. So a couple other quick call outs before I go through this workflow. This tool is intended to be leveraged on client calls in real time. So the first part of this, which I'll show you, is a questionnaire that the seller uses to guide the conversation with the prospect. But the main part is this report that's generated in real time that sellers can immediately share with the prospect on the call to aid in a more robust value-based conversation. So let's jump in. One of the key features of the tool is really how it's tied to CRM. And at the beginning of the tool, right, sellers are required to enter account and opportunity information, so the output could be attached to those same pieces and records in CRM. Once the seller hits begin assessment, the tool then guides the seller to ask probing questions around key value pillars of the solution. And in this example, the collaboration is the topic. And so the key pillars here are things like team dynamics, organizational agility, and extended teams. And as the conversation unfolds, there are multiple paths that the seller can go down based on the answers to the questions. And this can be a short or long, depending on the scenario and where this conversation is in the sales cycle. But for the purposes of this overview, I'll kind of skip to the end here. So at the end of the initial conversation, this is the customer report that I was talking about. And the idea here is that sellers can review with the customer in real time and talk through their scores and the profile and discuss where there might be areas of opportunity. And in this case, it looks like the company is actually not doing too bad in terms of their overall score, but it looks like they've got areas of opportunity in areas such as organizational agility and extended teams. And so how a seller can use this is they can actually share the screen directly with the prospect and talk through those different elements. They can double click into the subcategories that make up those scores. And they can even dive into ways in which the prospect might improve in those specific areas. And then at the end, of course, the seller can email this report to the customer, schedule a follow-up to dive deeper into identified areas. And the customer can leverage this report right internally and socialize it with their colleagues and generate interest in conversation internally about those same opportunity areas. And again, since this report is tied to that account and opportunity information that we captured up front, the output is automatically uploaded in CRM so that all the account and pursuit members can review the output and ensure the next engagement really builds upon the insights that was gained in this interaction. So at the end of the day, the tool really helped their sales team move to value-based conversations, and but that was also tuned to that individual customer scenario. And 6 months into this, the business impact was pretty significant. What we found was sellers that were actively using this tool had almost more than double, 136%, the sales of their colleagues, and 50% bigger deal sizes than sellers that weren't adopting this. So just by investing in this one customer touch point, it really changed the game for this particular company. But imagine doing something similar across the entire customer journey, where each engagement builds upon the other and the tools are connected. I'd say one organization that we've worked with in this past year has really done that. And in my mind, it's helping them win their category. And then the key for them was landing these tools on a platform similar to the example I'm kind of showing with you here, that is supported by a common data service that connects the data in the back end and then ultimately connects to the core sales technology like CRM. So in this, they were able to do things like track individual seller activities, look at the account level and see all the historical engagements, and also just understand the efficacy of the tools that they built. You know, were they being adopted? Were they driving the right outcomes? And what were they learning about their customers and all of it? So I will share just quickly with you two modules that they built to support this. The first one is what they called the dashboard. And this was at the user or the seller level. And the purpose of this was for sellers to be able to quickly reference past engagements so that they could plan and collaborate on future customer touch points. There's also a customer specific view, right, which is an overview where you can see all the activities that have been performed on an account and quickly review that output. You can download them, you can share them with other team members, and of course you can find them in the CRM record itself. The second module was at the leadership level, and we called this the performance section. And the first part of this was the executive summary. And this is where you could see the overall engagement, but also which tools were being used the most and what was being the most successful. And if you clicked into one of the actual tool reports, you can even start seeing pipeline attribution, right? To understand the ROI and the business impact of the tools. And in some of the cases, you could even get to see, depending on the tool, what was the solution that was being actually driven by the tool and what's becoming more popular. So this is just a quick view of really what we mean when we say digital customer engagement, right? Whether it's a one tool or a series of tools or a platform that fits within your tech stack, it's really all about just creating higher value and differentiated experiences.
That was awesome, Jared. Thank you for the demo. I'm hoping we can jump into some questions. Maybe time for one or two here.
Yeah, let me jump back to the deck.
Perfect. While he's doing that, thank you so much, Jared and Ethan, for your presentation today. And thank you everyone for joining and sending in your questions. We'll have time for just one question that was dropped in, which reads, I love how dynamic the tools are and the way they align to specific moments in the sales process where most buyers and sellers are struggling in a virtual context. But I can see also this feeling overwhelming for someone trying to make their evolution into a digital sales approach. What's your advice to people on where and how to get started?
That is a great question. What we see is most organizations start with building just one tool that tackles the part of the customer journey that has the most friction. And sometimes that's at the beginning of the customer journey where tools like the solution assessment that we covered comes in. Other times that's, excuse me, at the end of the buying process where tools like quote builders and value calculators can really help close deals. And other times it's in the middle where tools like digital workshops and consulting discussion enablers can really accelerate opportunities. So it really differs based on each organization. But I'd say where we see more immediate success is when organizations are standing up these types of tools on their current technology infrastructure, rather than going to try to just buy another sales platform. So the key that we're seeing to scaling that success early on is connecting to the core sales technology that the company's already using.
Great. And actually this presentation does go to 11:45, so we do have time for more questions. Another one that was dropped in is for the solution assessment you walked us through, is that something that requires a seller to guide customers through, or could that tool be self-directed?
Yeah, another good question. I think the short answer is it can be used in both ways. We've created similar assessments that can be posted to websites and part of more of a self-directed customer journey, which is actually great when targeting SMB and where scale is important. For the version of the tool I just reviewed, that is more mid-market enterprise focused, where having a seller actually walk through and discuss those topics in depth is more added value.
Perfect. Next question is, you mentioned having to enter data at the beginning so that it can link to the CRM. I assume it can also be built, integrated to pull in data from the CRM. So a seller merely might have to pick from their ops. Is that correct?
Yeah, it can be bi-directional, right? So, typically we want sellers to live in one area and home, and for a lot of organizations that's within the CRM. So it's really important that the outputs are really connected and landed in the CRM of choice. But one organization we worked with also wanted that dashboard in the tool platform itself, so that they could also, if they're in the tool platform preparing for an engagement, they can also get the relevant CRM information as well. So the bilateral data connection both ways is a really important aspect of connecting the tools together.
Great. So the last question that we'll kind of read out today is, what role do you see in-person engagements playing in the sales cycle over the next few years?
Yeah, that is that is a great question, and I think it actually is going to vary significantly by industry. But as the economy continues to open up, I do know some industries are chomping at the bit to get back to field events. However, others like high tech, for example, really they've largely moved on and will be more permanently adopting a digital only sales model. I think most sales organizations are going to likely end up having more of a hybrid model, where you'll see there will be demand for both field and digital engagements, even within the same industry, I think, at those key customer touch points. So the challenge is, regardless of what industry or organization is in, you're going to have to be able to deliver these differentiated experiences in both field kind of in-person arenas and in the digital format.
Fantastic. Well, thank you again, Jared and Ethan, for your presentation today, and everybody that was that joined along and added in some questions. We'll be sending out the recording and slide deck in the next day or two, so please check your inbox for the recording and a recap with further resources and different ways that you can get in touch with us for further information. Thanks again, everyone, and we really hope to see you in our future webinars.
Bye.
Thank
Bye.
you.